The scream that split the mountain silence sent every bird within a mile scattering toward the sky. And Gabriel Owens dropped his wood plane so fast it clattered across the cabin floor. His wife was not due for another month, but the sound tearing from their bedroom told him that nature had its own timeline, and his carefully laid plans meant nothing now. He burst through the door to find Amelia Foster Owens gripping the iron bed frame, her knuckles white as the sheets beneath her, her face glistening with sweat despite the cool October air drifting through the window. Her dark hair clung to her temples, and when her green eyes found his, he saw both terror and determination burning there. "The baby," she gasped, and another contraction seized her before she could say more. Her body curled inward, and Gabriel crossed the room in 3 long strides, his massive hands finding hers, letting her squeeze until he thought his bones might crack. "I am here," he said, his deep voice steady even as his heart hammered against his ribs. "I am right here with you." It was 1873, and they lived 15 miles outside Wood River, Nebraska, in a cabin Gabriel had built with his own hands 3 years ago. The nearest doctor was in town, a full day's ride down the mountain if the weather held. The midwife, Mrs. Henderson, lived even farther in the opposite direction. There was no time to fetch either one. Amelia's contraction released her, and she fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. "It is too soon. Gabriel, something is wrong." "Nothing is wrong." He pressed his lips to her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, the lavender soap she made in their kitchen. "Babies come when they are ready. You are strong. The strongest woman I have ever known." She would have laughed if another pain had not taken hold of her. Gabriel had seen many things in his 32 years. He had trapped beaver in streams so cold they turned his hands blue. He had faced down a grizzly with nothing but a knife and his wits. He had built a life from nothing in these mountains, his body hardened by endless labor, his shoulders broad enough to carry whole tree trunks, his arms roped with muscle from swinging an axe and hauling stone. But nothing had prepared him for the helplessness of watching his wife suffer and knowing he could do nothing to take the pain from her. "Tell me what to do," he said. "Water," she managed. "Hot water and clean cloths." Gabriel moved with purpose, grateful to have a task. He stoked the fire until flames roared in the hearth, filled the large pot with water from the pump, set it to boil. He gathered every clean cloth they owned, his mind racing through fragments of things he had heard women discuss, things he had witnessed when animals gave birth. It was not the same, he knew that, but it was something. When he returned to the bedroom, Amelia was pacing, one hand pressed to the small of her back, the other cradling the swell of her belly. She wore only her nightgown, and he could see the way her body trembled with effort. "Walking helps," she said. "I need to move." So he walked with her, his arm around her waist, taking her weight when the contractions came, holding her upright when her knees threatened to buckle. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms and a loft, but they traced a path from the bedroom to the main room and back again, over and over. Through the window, he could see the cradle he had finished just yesterday, sitting on the porch where he had been applying the final coat of oil when her scream had cut through the afternoon. He had known it was early to finish it. The baby was not due until mid-November, but something in him had needed to complete it, to have it ready and waiting. He had spent months selecting the perfect pieces of cedar, carving gentle curves into the rockers, sanding every surface until it was smooth as glass. He had wanted everything to be perfect. "I can see it," Amelia said, following his gaze. "The cradle. It is beautiful. Not as beautiful as the baby who will sleep in it." She smiled, but it vanished as another contraction gripped her. They were coming faster now, barely 2 minutes apart. Gabriel guided her back to the bed, helped her lie down, and she grabbed his hand again as her body bore down with a force that terrified him. "I need to push," she gasped. "Then push." The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of effort and encouragement, of fear and faith intertwined. Gabriel had never felt so large and clumsy as he did trying to help his wife bring their child into the world. His hands, which could shape wood and stone with precision, felt awkward as he positioned pillows behind her back, as he wiped the sweat from her face, as he told her she was doing wonderfully when he had no idea if that was true. But Amelia was a force of nature. She pushed when her body demanded it, breathed when she could, and never once asked him to leave or complained that she wished for someone else. She trusted him, and that trust gave him strength. I can see the head, Gabriel said, his voice rough with emotion. He positioned himself at the foot of the bed, and there it was, a crown of dark hair appearing with each push. Amelia, I can see our baby. She sobbed with relief and pushed harder. The sun was setting beyond the windows, painting the room in gold and amber, and with a final tremendous effort, she brought their child into the world. Gabriel caught the tiny, slippery body in his huge hands, and for a moment, he forgot to breathe. The baby was so small, impossibly small, with a wrinkled red face and eyes squeezed shut against the sudden brightness. Then the tiny mouth opened, and a cry split the air, strong and furious and utterly perfect. "A boy," Gabriel said, his voice breaking. "We have a son." He wrapped the baby in a clean cloth and placed him on Amelia's chest, watching as her arms came around their child with a fierceness that made his throat tight. She was crying and laughing at the same time, her fingers tracing the baby's tiny features, counting his fingers and toes. "He's so small," she whispered. "He is perfect." There was still work to be done. Gabriel cut the cord with his hunting knife, which he had boiled in water. He delivered the afterbirth, cleaned Amelia as gently as he could, changed the sheets beneath her with her still in the bed, moving her as little as possible. She was exhausted, her face pale, but she refused to let go of their son. "What should we name him?" she asked. Gabriel studied the tiny face, the way the baby's hand curled around Amelia's finger, those impossibly small fingers gripping with surprising strength. "What about Thomas, after your father?" Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Thomas Gabriel Owens. Yes, that is perfect." Night had fallen completely by the time Gabriel finally brought the cradle inside from the porch. He placed it beside the bed, close enough that Amelia could reach it without getting up, and lined it with the softest blankets they owned. When Amelia finally consented to let Thomas sleep, Gabriel lifted his son with exquisite care and laid him in the cradle he had built, watching as the baby settled into sleep with a sigh so small it barely stirred the air. "You knew," Amelia said softly. "Somehow you knew to have it ready." Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. "I just wanted to be prepared." "No one could have been more prepared than you were today." Her eyes were heavy, exhaustion pulling at her, but she fought it, wanting to stay awake, to keep watching their son. "I was so scared, Gabriel. When the pain started, I thought I would die up here on this mountain, and you would be left alone with a baby you did not know how to care for. I would have learned." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "But you did not die. You brought our son into this world, and you did it with more courage than I have ever seen. I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm grateful I was here." She finally let sleep take her, her hand still in his, and Gabriel sat there in the darkness, listening to the sound of his wife's breathing and his son's tiny snuffles from the cradle. The fire crackled in the hearth. Wind whispered through the pines outside. The mountains settled around them like a protective embrace, and Gabriel had never felt so complete. But the peace was short-lived. By morning, Amelia had developed a fever. Gabriel woke to find her shivering despite the heavy quilts piled on top of her, her skin burning to the touch. Thomas was crying, hungry and insistent, and when Gabriel lifted him to Amelia, she struggled to focus her eyes. "I am so cold," she whispered. Fear clamped around Gabriel's heart like an iron fist. He had heard of women dying from childbed fever, had lost his own mother that way when his youngest sister was born. He knew the signs, knew the danger, and the knowledge turned his blood to ice. "I'm going to get the doctor," he said. "You cannot leave us." "I have to." He placed Thomas in her arms, watching as her body responded to the baby's needs even as her mind drifted. "The fever will not break on its own. You need medicine. It is a full day to town and back. Then I will ride faster." He prepared everything before he left. He banked the fire and left wood stacked high beside it. He filled every container with water. He left bread and cold meat within easy reach of the bed, though he doubted Amelia would eat. He showed her the rifle, loaded and ready, though she was in no condition to use it. He did everything he could think of, and it still felt woefully inadequate. "Gabriel." Her hand caught his wrist as he turned to leave, her grip surprisingly strong. "Come back to us. Nothing in this world could stop me." He kissed her forehead, lingering over the heat radiating from her skin, then pressed his lips to Thomas's downy head. The baby was barely 12 hours old. The thought of leaving them made him feel like he was tearing his own heart out, but staying would be worse. Without medicine, Amelia would die, and then what would become of Thomas? Gabriel saddled his horse, a sturdy mountain gelding named Smoke, in record time. The animal sensed his urgency and danced sideways as Gabriel mounted, already eager to run. The path down the mountain was treacherous in the best of conditions, a narrow track that wound through dense forest and crossed 3 separate streams. In the pre-dawn darkness, it was suicide. Gabriel did not care. He gave Smoke his head and let the horse pick his way down the slope, trusting the animal's instincts more than his own vision. The first stream crossing nearly ended them both when Smoke's hoof slipped on a wet stone, but the gelding caught himself and scrambled up the far bank with Gabriel clinging to his neck. "Good boy," Gabriel gasped. "Good boy, keep going." They pushed on. The sun rose, painting the autumn forest in brilliant reds and golds, but Gabriel barely noticed. His mind was on the cabin behind him, on his wife fighting for her life, on his newborn son who needed his mother. He had faced down danger more times than he could count, but nothing had ever frightened him like this helplessness in the face of an enemy he could not fight with his hands. Wood River came into view as the sun reached its zenith. The town was small, barely 24 buildings clustered around a main street, but it had a doctor, and that was all Gabriel cared about. He rode straight through the middle of town, scattering chickens and drawing startled stares, and pulled Smoke to a halt in front of the doctor's office, hard enough to make the horse rear. Dr. Harrison was a thin, gray-haired man in his 60s, and he took one look at Gabriel's face and started gathering supplies. "Childbed fever?" he asked. "I think so. She had the baby yesterday, too early. By last night she was burning up." "How early?" "A month." The doctor's expression grew grimmer, but he moved faster, stuffing bottles and instruments into his bag. "I will need to examine her. The baby, is he well?" "He was when I left." "How long ago was that?" Gabriel calculated quickly. 6 hours, maybe 7. "You rode down the mountain in 6 hours?" The doctor paused, staring at him. "That is not possible." "It had better be possible going back up, too, because I am not leaving my family alone any longer than I have to." They rode together, the doctor on his own horse, a mare too old and slow for Gabriel's liking. He held Smoke back to match her pace, every minute of delay feeling like an eternity. The doctor tried to make conversation, asking about the birth, about Amelia's symptoms, but Gabriel answered in monosyllables, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. The sun was sinking toward the western horizon when they finally reached the cabin. Gabriel hit the ground before Smoke had fully stopped and sprinted for the door. Inside, he found Amelia exactly where he had left her, Thomas cradled against her chest, but her eyes were closed and her breathing was shallow and rapid. "Amelia." He touched her face, and the heat nearly scorched his fingers. "Amelia, I am back. The doctor is here." Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. The baby whimpered, hungry again, and Gabriel carefully extracted Thomas from her arms and stepped back to let Dr. Harrison work. The examination seemed to take forever. The doctor listened to her heart and lungs, checked the bleeding, probed her abdomen with gentle fingers. Amelia moaned but did not wake, and Gabriel paced the small room with Thomas in his arms, the baby's face scrunched up in displeasure. "He needs to eat," the doctor said without looking up. "Do you have a cow? A goat? That will do. Milk mixed with water, warmed but not hot. You will need to feed him with a cloth. Let him suck it from that until your wife can nurse him again." Until, not if. Gabriel clung to that word like a lifeline. He prepared the milk as instructed, his large hands shaking as he dipped a clean cloth in the mixture and offered it to Thomas. The baby latched on immediately, sucking frantically, and some of the tension in Gabriel's shoulders eased. At least this was something he could do, something tangible. When he returned to the bedroom, Dr. Harrison was mixing something in a cup, a brown powder that smelled bitter and medicinal. "Help me sit her up," he said. Together they propped Amelia against the pillows, and the doctor coaxed the medicine between her lips, massaging her throat until she swallowed reflexively. She coughed and turned her head away, but he persisted until the cup was empty. "What is it?" Gabriel asked. "Willow bark for the fever, golden seal for infection, and a few other things." The doctor set the cup aside and met Gabriel's eyes. "I will not lie to you, Mr. Owens. She is very sick. The fever is high, and she's been bleeding more than I would like. If we can get the fever down in the next 24 hours, she has a chance. If not, he did not finish, but he did not need to. Gabriel understood. Tell me what to do. Keep her cool, wet cloths on her forehead, her wrists, her chest. Make her drink water whenever she wakes. I will give her more medicine every 4 hours. And pray, Mr. Owens, pray harder than you ever have. Gabriel did all of it. He sat beside the bed with Thomas sleeping in his cradle and bathed Amelia's face with cool water. He lifted her head and helped the doctor administer medicine. He changed the baby and fed him milk-soaked cloths and rocked the cradle when Thomas fussed. He did not sleep. He could not have slept if someone had held a gun to his head. Dr. Harrison dozed in a chair by the fire, waking every few hours to check on his patient. The night stretched on endlessly, and Amelia's fever did not break. By dawn, Gabriel was frantic. Her skin was still scorching, her breathing still labored, and she had not opened her eyes in more than a day. He knelt beside the bed and took her hand in both of his, pressing it to his chest. "Amelia, please," he whispered. "Please do not leave me. I do not know how to do this without you. Thomas needs you. I need you. You are the strongest person I know. Fight this. Please, fight this." The sun rose higher. Dr. Harrison gave her another dose of medicine. Thomas woke and cried, and Gabriel fed him, his movements mechanical, his mind far away. He was preparing more milk when he heard the doctor call his name. He ran back to the bedroom to find Amelia's eyes open, clear and focused for the first time in hours. "Gabriel?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was hers, present and aware. "I am here." He took her hand, relief flooding through him so strongly his knees nearly buckled. "I'm right here." "The baby?" "He is perfect, strong and healthy and eating like he wants to make up for being early." A smile flickered across her face. "I want to see him." Gabriel brought Thomas to her, placing him in her arms with infinite care, and watched as she studied their son with wonder, as if seeing him for the first time. The doctor checked her temperature and gave Gabriel a slight nod. "The fever has broken," he said. "She is not out of danger yet, but this is a very good sign." Over the next 3 days, Amelia grew stronger. The color returned to her cheeks. She was able to sit up on her own, to nurse Thomas, to drink broth and eat small amounts of food. The doctor stayed with them, monitoring her progress, changing his prognosis from grave to cautious to optimistic. Gabriel barely left her side. He slept in snatches, always with one ear attuned to any change in her breathing. He brought her water and food and fresh nightgowns. He changed Thomas's cloths and held him while Amelia rested. He did everything he could to show her, without words, how terrified he had been, how grateful he was that she had stayed with him. On the 4th day, Dr. Harrison declared her well enough for him to return to town. "But you need to rest," he told Amelia sternly. "No work for at least 2 weeks. No lifting anything heavier than the baby. Your husband will have to take care of everything." "I can do that," Gabriel said. "I am sure you can." The doctor turned to him, his expression softening. "You did well, Mr. Owens. Not many men could have delivered a baby and then ridden down the mountain the way you did. Your wife is lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one." After the doctor left, the cabin settled into a new rhythm. Gabriel took over all the household tasks, cooking meals, washing clothes, tending the animals, all while caring for Thomas whenever Amelia needed to sleep. His son, he discovered, had a powerful set of lungs and very definite opinions about when he wanted to eat, which was approximately every 2 hours, day and night. But Gabriel did not mind. He would rock Thomas in his arms, this tiny person who was half him and half Amelia, and marvel at the perfection of him. He would trace the baby's miniature features, the nose that was Amelia's, the shape of the ears that matched his own. He would watch Thomas sleep and feel his heart expand with a love so fierce it frightened him. Amelia recovered slowly but steadily. By the end of the 1st week, she was walking around the cabin. By the end of the 2nd, she was insisting on cooking supper. Gabriel hovered like a protective bear, ready to catch her if she swooned, to take Thomas if she looked tired, to argue if she tried to do too much. "I'm fine," she said, laughing as he took a pot from her hands. "Gabriel, I promise, I'm fine." "You almost died." The laughter faded from her eyes, replaced by something softer. She reached up and cupped his bearded cheek in her palm. "But I did not. I am here. We are both here, and we are safe. And you made that possible. You built this life for us, this beautiful cabin, this home. You brought our son into the world with your own hands. You saved my life. Do you understand how extraordinary that is?" He turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss there. "I would do anything for you." "I know." She stretched up on her toes, and he bent down to meet her, their lips finding each other with the ease of long practice. The kiss was gentle, tender, a reaffirmation of everything they had survived together. Thomas chose that moment to wake with a cry, and they broke apart, both smiling. Gabriel lifted the baby from his cradle and handed him to Amelia, watching as she settled into the rocking chair and began to nurse. The sight of them together, his wife and son, bathed in firelight, made something in his chest ache with contentment. "He's going to be big like you," Amelia said. "Look at the size of his feet." "Poor thing. He got my feet but your nose." "My nose is perfectly fine, thank you." "It is perfect," Gabriel agreed, "just like the rest of you." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling, and Gabriel settled at her feet, his hand resting on her ankle, content to simply be near them. October gave way to November, and the first snow came early, dusting the pines white and turning the mountain into a wonderland. Gabriel chopped enough wood to last them through the winter and stacked it against the cabin wall. He hunted deer and elk, smoking the meat for the long months ahead. He reinforced the barn where they kept the goat and the chickens, making sure every crack was sealed against the cold. Amelia regained her strength fully, her body recovering from the trauma of Thomas's birth with the resilience of youth. She was 24 years old, full of energy and determination, and she threw herself into preparing for winter with the same fierceness she brought to everything. They had met 2 years ago, when Gabriel had come down to Wood River for supplies and found a young woman standing in the middle of the general store, arguing with the owner about the price of flour. She had been magnificent, her green eyes flashing, her chin raised defiantly, and Gabriel had been lost the moment he saw her. She was new to town, she had told him later, after he had paid for her flour and invited her to supper. Her parents had died of cholera on the journey west, and she had continued on alone, determined to make a new life for herself. She had no family, no connections, nothing but her own grit and determination. Gabriel had fallen in love with her before their meal ended. She was smart and funny and completely unimpressed by his size or strength. She looked at him like he was a man, not a beast of burden, and when he asked if he could court her, she had laughed and said yes. They were married 6 months later. Amelia moved up the mountain to his cabin without a single complaint, trading the relative comfort of town for a life of isolation and hard work. She learned to make soap and candles, to garden and preserve food, to shoot a rifle and skin a rabbit. She transformed the cabin from a bachelor's sparse shelter into a home, adding curtains and rugs and warmth. And now they had Thomas, and their family was complete. Winter deepened. Snow fell in earnest, piling up against the cabin walls, transforming the world into shades of white and gray. Gabriel and Amelia settled into the enforced stillness of the season, spending long evenings by the fire while Thomas grew and changed with astonishing speed. By Christmas, he was smiling, his whole face lighting up when Gabriel appeared over his cradle. By New Year, he was laughing, a gurgling sound that made both his parents melt. He grew rounder, healthier, his early arrival forgotten as he thrived on Amelia's milk and their constant attention. Gabriel had never known he could love like this. He had loved Amelia, deeply and completely, but Thomas opened something new in him, a protectiveness and tenderness he had not known he possessed. He would hold his son and feel overwhelmed by the responsibility of it, this tiny person who depended on him for everything, who trusted him completely. "You are a wonderful father," Amelia told him one night as they lay in bed, Thomas asleep in his cradle beside them. "I am trying." "You are more than trying. You are natural at it. I watch you with him, and I see how gentle you are, how patient. He adores you already." "He is too young to adore anyone." "No, he is not. He knows you. He knows your voice, your smell, your touch. When you hold him, he relaxes. He feels safe." Gabriel rolled onto his side to face her, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "That is all I want, for both of you to feel safe." "We do." She moved closer, fitting herself against his body, her head on his chest. Gabriel, I need to tell you something. His hand stilled in her hair. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong. I just need you to know that I have never been happier than I am right now, in this moment. This cabin, this life, you and Thomas, it is everything I ever wanted. I know it is hard sometimes, living up here so far from everyone, but I would not trade it for anything. Relief washed through him, followed by a wave of love so strong it made his throat tight. I would not trade it either. They made love slowly, carefully, mindful of her still healing body, and afterward they lay tangled together, listening to the wind howl outside and the soft sounds of their son sleeping. Winter passed in a blur of small moments, Thomas rolling over for the first time, his first real laugh, the way he would reach for Gabriel when he cried, his tiny hands opening and closing, Amelia singing lullabies in the rocking chair, Gabriel carving wooden toys by the fire, the three of them huddled together under quilts when the temperatures dropped below zero. Spring came late to the mountain, but when it finally arrived, it transformed everything. The snow melted, revealing green shoots pushing up through the earth. The streams ran high and fast with runoff. Birds returned, filling the air with song, and the forest came alive with new growth. Thomas was 5 months old, fat and healthy and endlessly curious about the world. Gabriel fashioned a sling from soft deerskin so he could carry the baby against his chest while he worked. And Thomas seemed to love it, watching everything with wide eyes, reaching for leaves and flowers and anything else that came within his grasp. Amelia planted a garden, turning over the soil and planting seeds with Thomas sitting nearby on a blanket. Gabriel expanded the barn, adding space for a cow he planned to buy in town. They worked side by side, rebuilding the life that winter had suspended, and Gabriel had never felt more content. In late May, they made the trip down to Wood River together for the first time since Thomas's birth. Gabriel drove the wagon, Amelia sitting beside him with Thomas in her arms, and the journey that had taken him 6 desperate hours on horseback stretched into a leisurely full day. The town had grown in their absence. New buildings lined the main street, and there were more people, more wagons, more noise. It felt overwhelming after months of mountain silence, but Thomas seemed fascinated by all the activity, his head swiveling to take in everything. They stopped at the general store first, stocking up on supplies they could not make themselves. The owner, Mr. Peterson, made a fuss over Thomas, and several women gathered around to admire the baby and ask Amelia questions about his birth. Gabriel listened as his wife told a carefully edited version of the story, leaving out the terror and focusing on the joy. She caught his eye over the women's heads and smiled, and he felt his heart skip in his chest, the way it always did when she looked at him like that. They visited Dr. Harrison next, who examined Thomas and declared him perfectly healthy. I must admit, Mr. Owens, I had my doubts when I left you that day. But you proved me wrong. Your son is thriving. Thanks to you, Gabriel said. Thanks to both of you. Mrs. Owens, you fought very hard to stay with your family. Your son is lucky to have such devoted parents. On the way out of town, they stopped at the church. Gabriel was not a particularly religious man, but Amelia had asked if they could have Thomas baptized, and he could not refuse her anything. The ceremony was simple, just them and the pastor and an elderly couple who served as witnesses. But when the pastor blessed Thomas and anointed him with water, Gabriel felt something shift in his chest, a sense of purpose and commitment that went deeper than words. They made camp that night halfway up the mountain, not wanting to push the horses after a long day. Gabriel built a fire while Amelia fed Thomas, and they ate a simple meal of bread and cheese and dried meat, watching the stars emerge overhead. Thank you for this, Amelia said. For what? For agreeing to the baptism. I know you are not sure about religion. Gabriel poked at the fire with a stick, considering. I'm not sure about churches and preachers, but I'm sure about this. He gestured to encompass their small camp, the baby in her arms, the vast wilderness around them. I am sure that something watches over us, something that brought you into my life, that kept you alive when you could have died, that gave us Thomas. I do not know what to call it, but I am grateful for it. That is all faith is, really. Gratitude for the gifts we have been given, and trust that we will be cared for. Then I suppose I have faith after all. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding his family close as the fire burned down to embers and the night deepened around them. They reached the cabin the next afternoon, and Gabriel carried their supplies inside while Amelia settled Thomas for a nap. The cabin smelled stale from being closed up, so he opened all the windows, letting fresh air sweep through. Everything was exactly as they had left it, but somehow it felt different, more precious after seeing the crowded chaos of town. This was their home, their sanctuary. And Gabriel would protect it with everything he had. Summer arrived in full, bringing long days and warm nights. Thomas continued to grow, reaching for everything, putting everything in his mouth, babbling in a language only he understood. He learned to sit up on his own, then to crawl, moving across the floor with surprising speed, and getting into everything. Gabriel baby-proofed the cabin as best he could, moving anything dangerous out of reach, covering sharp corners, watching his son with hawk-like vigilance. Thomas had no fear, which terrified Gabriel. The baby would crawl straight toward the fire if allowed, or try to eat dirt or grab the cat's tail. It was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Amelia handled it all with grace and humor, laughing when Thomas smeared food in his hair, patiently redirecting him when he headed toward danger, endlessly patient with his fussing and crying. Gabriel marveled at her, at the way motherhood seemed to come naturally to her, when he still felt like he was making it up as he went. "You are doing fine," she assured him when he voiced this concern. "We are both learning. There is no instruction manual for being a parent. I just want to do right by him." "You are. Gabriel, you are the most devoted father I have ever seen. Thomas is lucky to have you." In August, they celebrated Thomas's first birthday, though he was technically only 9 months old. Amelia baked a small cake with honey and dried apples, and they let Thomas smash his hands into it, laughing at the mess he made. Gabriel had carved him a set of wooden blocks, smooth and perfectly sized for small hands, and Thomas immediately put one in his mouth. "At least we know he will not starve," Amelia said, wiping frosting from the baby's face. That night, after Thomas was asleep, Gabriel pulled Amelia outside to the porch. The cradle still sat there, though Thomas had long since outgrown it. Gabriel had built him a proper crib for inside, but he could not bring himself to put the cradle away. "Remember the day I finished this?" he asked, running his hand over the smooth wood. "I was just thinking about that. You were so proud of yourself." "I was proud of what it represented, a future, a family. I had no idea how much work it would actually be." She laughed. "Nor did I, but it is good work, is it not? The best work I have ever done." They stood together in the gathering dusk, and Gabriel thought about how much had changed in a year, how close he had come to losing everything, how grateful he was for every ordinary moment, every crying fit and sleepless night in frustration, because it meant they were all here, together, alive. "I want another baby," Amelia said suddenly. Gabriel looked at her in surprise. "Now?" "Not this exact moment, but yes, I want Thomas to have a brother or sister. I do not want him to grow up alone." "Are you sure? After everything that happened?" "I am sure." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Yes, it was hard. Yes, I was frightened, but I survived, and Thomas is perfect, and I want to do it again. With you. Only with you." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her. "If that's what you want, then yes. But I'm finding the doctor before you are even due this time. I am not going through that again." "Agreed." They went inside and put themselves to bed, and Gabriel held his wife close, thinking about the future, about more children, about Thomas growing up strong and healthy, about growing old on this mountain with Amelia by his side. It was a good future, a future worth fighting for. Autumn came again, painting the forest in flames of red and gold. Thomas took his first steps in October, lurching across the floor into Gabriel's waiting arms, and both parents cheered like he had accomplished something miraculous. By November, he was walking everywhere, getting into even more trouble, and Gabriel spent half his time chasing after his son to keep him from hurting himself. Winter returned, and with it, the quiet months of being snowed in. But this year was different. This year, they had Thomas to entertain them, to fill the silence with laughter and chaos. And this year, Amelia was pregnant again. She told Gabriel on Christmas morning, and he was so overwhelmed with joy and terror that he could not speak. He just held her, thinking about cradles and doctors and fevers, about tiny hands and first steps and futures unfolding. "We are going to town when you are 7 months along," he said. "We are staying with the doctor until the baby comes." "Gabriel, that is excessive." "I do not care. I am not risking you again," she argued, but he was immovable on this point, and eventually she agreed. They would make arrangements, would ensure that this time she had proper medical care from the start. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Amelia was sick for the first few months but recovered her energy by spring. Her belly swelled, and Thomas seemed fascinated by it, patting it gently and babbling at his unborn sibling. Gabriel built a second crib, this one larger than the first, and started gathering supplies for another baby. In May, when Amelia was 7 months pregnant, they made the journey down to Wood River. Dr. Harrison had agreed to let them stay in a room above his office, and they settled in for the waiting period. It was strange living in town after so long on the mountain, strange hearing people and wagons and noise at all hours, but Gabriel adapted for Amelia's sake. Thomas loved it. There were other children to play with, new things to see and do, and he thrived on the attention. Amelia rested and prepared, and Gabriel worked odd jobs around town to pay for their lodging and to keep himself occupied. The baby came in early July, right on schedule this time. Dr. Harrison was present from the first contraction, and while the labor was still long and difficult, it was nothing like the terror of Thomas's birth. Amelia labored in a clean bed with medical supervision, and when she pushed their second son into the world, the doctor was there to catch him. Gabriel cut the cord himself this time, his hands steady, his heart full. The baby was bigger than Thomas had been, healthier, and his cry was strong and immediate. "Another boy," Dr. Harrison announced, wrapping him in a blanket. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Owens." Amelia was tired but glowing as she held their new son, and Gabriel sat beside her with Thomas on his lap, all of them admiring the newest member of their family. "What should we name him?" Amelia asked. Gabriel studied the baby's face, looking for something to distinguish him from his brother. He had lighter hair, more of a golden brown than Thomas's dark locks, and his eyes, when they opened, were blue instead of hazel. "What about James?" Gabriel suggested. "James Gabriel Owens." "James?" Amelia repeated, testing it out. "Yes, I like that. James and Thomas, our boys." They stayed in town for 2 weeks, making sure Amelia recovered fully before attempting the journey home. When they finally loaded the wagon and headed up the mountain, Gabriel felt like he could breathe again. Town was fine for visiting, but the mountain was where they belonged. Thomas was almost 2 now, talking in full sentences and endlessly curious about his baby brother. He wanted to hold James constantly, to touch his hands and feet, to tell him stories that made no sense. Gabriel supervised carefully, making sure Thomas's enthusiasm did not overwhelm the newborn, but his heart swelled watching his sons together. Amelia recovered quickly from this birth, her body stronger for having done it before. Within a month, she was back to her normal routine, and Gabriel could finally relax. They had 2 healthy sons, and Amelia was well. Everything he had feared had been avoided this time. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. Thomas grew tall and strong, so much like Gabriel that it sometimes startled him to see his own features reflected in his son's face. James was different, quieter and more thoughtful, with Amelia's green eyes and her gentle spirit. They balanced each other, Thomas's energy and James's calm, and they were inseparable. Gabriel taught them to fish and hunt, to chop wood and build things with their hands. Amelia taught them to read and write, using a handful of precious books she had brought from town. They learned the rhythms of mountain life, the turning of seasons, the importance of hard work and family. When Thomas was 8 and James was 6, Amelia gave birth to a daughter. They named her Grace, and she had her father's size and her mother's beauty, a combination that would break hearts when she was older. Gabriel was impossibly tender with her, this tiny girl who wrapped him around her finger from the moment she was born. The cabin expanded with their family. Gabriel added 2 rooms, giving the boys their own space and creating a separate bedroom for Grace. He built furniture and toys, repaired the barn, improved the gardens. The mountain homestead became a true ranch, with cows and chickens and a few pigs, enough to make them self-sufficient. Thomas helped with the heavy work, strong for his age and eager to prove himself. James tended the animals and helped his mother with the cooking. Grace, when she was old enough, took over the garden, her small hands gentle with the plants. Gabriel and Amelia grew older together, their bodies marked by the years of hard work, but their love as strong as ever. They still stole moments alone when they could, still looked at each other across the dinner table, and smiled at private jokes. They had built something lasting, something good, and they knew it. When Thomas turned 18, he asked to build his own cabin on the far side of their property. Gabriel helped him, teaching him the same skills he had used to build their home all those years ago. When it was finished, Thomas brought home a bride, a girl from town named Sarah, and the cycle began again. James married at 20, choosing a quiet life on the mountain with a woman who loved books as much as he did. They built their cabin on the opposite side of the property, and Gabriel watched his family spread out around him, creating a small community bound by blood and love. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and strong-willed like her mother. She had suitors from town, but she was in no hurry to marry, content to help her parents and ride the mountain trails on her horse. Gabriel and Amelia, now in their 50s, settled into the slower rhythms of age. They had grandchildren to spoil, grown children to advise, a legacy to be proud of. The cabin where they had started their life together was now the center of a sprawling family compound, and on Sundays, everyone gathered there for supper. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains and their family laughed around the table, Gabriel looked at Amelia and saw the girl he had fallen in love with in Wood River all those years ago. Her hair was gray now, and there were lines around her eyes, but she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, catching him staring. "That cradle," he said, "the one I finished before Thomas was born." "What about it?" "I was thinking that I did not know what I was building it for, not really. I thought I was building it for a baby, but I was wrong. I was building it for all of this, for Thomas and James and Grace, for their children, for a future I could not even imagine." Amelia's eyes grew bright with tears. It was a very good cradle. It was the start of everything. That night, after everyone had gone home and the cabin was quiet again, Gabriel brought the cradle in from where it had been stored in the barn. He cleaned it carefully, oiling the wood until it gleamed, and placed it in the main room beside the fire. "What are you doing?" Amelia asked. "Grace will need it someday, or one of the grandchildren. It seems wrong to leave it packed away." She came to stand beside him, her hand finding his, their fingers interlacing with the ease of decades. "You built it early, you know. Thomas was not due for another month." "I know, but somehow I knew I needed to finish it, that it needed to be ready and waiting. You have always known what we needed before we knew it ourselves." He pulled her close, this woman who had given him everything, who had walked beside him through joy and terror and everything in between. "I just loved you. Everything else followed from that." They stood together in the firelight, the cradle between them, and Gabriel thought about the mountain man he had been when he carved it, strong and solitary and certain he needed nothing more than his own 2 hands. He had been wrong. He had needed Amelia. He had needed his children. He had needed this life they had built together, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one act of love at a time. The cradle rocked gently in the firelight, empty now but full of promise, waiting for the next generation. Gabriel had finished it early all those years ago, had it ready before he knew he would need it, and in doing so, he had set the foundation for everything that followed. He had built a cradle. He had built a family. He had built a life worth living, and he would not change a single moment of it. The mountain man and his bride, the babies who had come early and on time and when they were ready, the children who had grown and spread their wings and stayed close, the grandchildren who filled the cabin with noise and love. All of it had started with a simple act of preparation, of hope made manifest in cedar and love. And as Gabriel stood there with Amelia in his arms and the cradle rocking softly beside them, he knew that he had built something that would last long after he was gone. A legacy of love, started with a single piece of furniture finished too early, built with hands that had learned to be gentle, by a man who had discovered that his greatest strength was not in his muscles, but in his capacity to love. The fire crackled. The wind whispered through the pines. And in the cabin on the mountain, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, Gabriel Owens held his wife close and gave thanks for every moment that had brought them here, to this perfect, ordinary, extraordinary night. Years continued to unfold like the petals of a mountain wildflower, each season bringing new reasons for gratitude and new challenges to face together. Gabriel watched his sons become fathers themselves, teaching their own children the same lessons he had taught them. He saw his daughter fall in love with a young man from town, a carpenter who reminded Gabriel of himself at that age, all earnest dedication and willing hands. When Grace married, Gabriel walked her down the aisle of the little church in Wood River, the same church where Thomas had been baptized. He gave her away with tears in his eyes, knowing she would be happy, but feeling the bittersweet ache of watching his youngest child begin her own journey. Amelia squeezed his hand during the ceremony, understanding without words what he was feeling. The carpenter, whose name was Daniel, built a cabin for Grace on the property, and Gabriel helped him just as he had helped his sons. The family compound grew, spreading across the mountain like roots of an ancient tree, each cabin connected by well-worn paths and bonds of love. Gabriel's body began to slow with age, his joints stiffening in the morning, his back protesting after a full day's work. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Amelia only deepened. They had been married for more than 30 years now, and he still reached for her hand whenever she was near, still kissed her forehead when she fell asleep beside him. One winter evening, when Gabriel was 58 and Amelia 56, they sat together by the fire, watching the snow fall outside. Their grandchildren had all gone home, leaving the cabin peaceful and quiet in a way it rarely was anymore. "Do you remember the night Thomas was born?" Amelia asked, her head resting on Gabriel's shoulder. "Every moment of it. I do not think I will ever forget how terrified I was." "I was terrified too, but I kept thinking about you, about how you had built that cradle and had it ready. It gave me hope somehow. Like if you believed we would have a future together, then it must be true." Gabriel tightened his arm around her. "I did believe it. I have always believed in us. Even when I was dying of fever? Especially then. I would not accept any other outcome." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to tell you something I have never told anyone." He waited, sensing the importance of whatever was coming. "When I was sick, when the fever was at its worst, I went somewhere else. I do not know if it was a dream or something more, but I was standing at a crossroads, and I could see two paths. One led into light, and it was so peaceful, Gabriel, so warm and inviting. And the other led back here, to you and Thomas, and it was dark and painful." Gabriel's heart clenched, understanding. "You chose to come back. I chose you. I chose our life together, our baby, our future. And I have never regretted it, not for one single moment. Even the hard times, even the pain and the fear and the exhaustion, all of it has been worth it because I got to spend it with you." He turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. "You are the bravest person I have ever known, the strongest, the kindest, the most beautiful. I do not deserve you, but I thank God every day that you chose me." We chose each other. They kissed, and it was sweet and tender and full of all the years they had shared, all the memories they had made, all the love they had built together. The next morning, Gabriel woke to find Amelia already up and dressed, standing by the window and watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold. "Come back to bed," he said. "It is too early to be up." "I could not sleep. I was thinking about the future." "What about it?" She turned to face him, and he was struck by the beauty of her in the morning light, the silver in her hair like a crown, her green eyes clear and bright. "I want to make sure our grandchildren know our story. I want them to know about the cradle you built, about Thomas being born early, about how you saved my life. I want them to understand that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every single day. A choice to stay, to fight, to build something together even when it is hard." Gabriel got out of bed and crossed to her, wrapping her in his arms. "Then we will tell them. We will make sure they know." And they did. Over the years that followed, Gabriel and Amelia became the keepers of the family stories, the ones who remembered and shared and passed down the history of their growing clan. They told their grandchildren about the early days, about the struggles and triumphs, about the importance of family and hard work and love. The cradle, still kept in the main cabin, became a symbol of their story. Each grandchild spent their first months rocked in it. Each one was told about how their grandfather had built it early, had it ready and waiting before anyone knew it would be needed. It became a tradition, a through line connecting generations. When Gabriel was 65, his body finally forced him to slow down significantly. His hands, which had once swung an axe and shaped wood with ease, now trembled with the effort of simple tasks. But he did not complain. He had lived a full life, had built a legacy that would outlast him by generations, and he was content. Amelia aged beside him, her body growing frailer, but her spirit as strong as ever. They spent their days sitting together, talking and remembering, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once run. They held hands and finished each other's sentences and loved each other with a depth that only decades of partnership could create. On a warm summer evening, when Gabriel was 72 and Amelia was 70, they sat together on the porch, the cradle rocking gently in the breeze beside them. The whole family had gathered for supper, and the sound of laughter and conversation drifted from inside the cabin. "Do you remember what I said to you the night I thought I was dying?" Amelia asked. Gabriel did not need to ask which night she meant. "You said nothing could stop me from coming back to you. And you kept your promise. You always keep your promises." "I try." She smiled and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I want to make you a promise now. When my time comes, I will wait for you. However long it takes, I will be waiting at that crossroads I told you about, and we will walk into the light together." His eyes burned with tears. "Amelia, I mean it, Gabriel. You gave me a beautiful life. You gave me children and grandchildren and more love than I ever dreamed possible. But I'm not done with you yet. This life or the next, I choose you. I will always choose you." He pulled her close, holding her with all the strength left in his aging body, and whispered against her hair, "I choose you too, always and forever." They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, as the stars emerged overhead. As their family celebrated life and love inside the cabin Gabriel had built with his own hands. And when Amelia finally fell asleep against his shoulder, Gabriel held her and thought about cradles and promises and the extraordinary gift of a life shared with the person you love. Years passed. Gabriel's sons and daughter cared for their parents as they aged, repaying the decades of love and support they had received. The family thrived, spreading across the mountain and down into the valley, a testament to the foundation Gabriel and Amelia had built. Amelia passed first, on a quiet spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming and the birds were singing. She died peacefully in her sleep, Gabriel's hand in hers, a smile on her face. Gabriel felt the moment she left, felt the absence of her like a physical wound, but he did not fall apart. She had made him a promise, and he believed her. She was waiting for him. He lived 2 more years, cared for by his children, surrounded by his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He spent his days in the cabin, often sitting beside the cradle and remembering the young man he had been, building it with such hope and determination, remembering Amelia's scream that had sent him running, remembering the tiny baby boy they had brought into the world together, the fever that had nearly taken her, the ride down the mountain that had saved them all. He remembered their life together, every moment of joy and sorrow, every triumph and failure, every ordinary day that had added up to an extraordinary love story. And he was grateful for all of it. When Gabriel's time came, it was also peaceful. He was 74 years old, and he slipped away on a summer afternoon, the cabin full of family, the mountain standing eternal watch outside his window. His last thought was of Amelia, of the promise she had made, and he went toward it with hope in his heart. They buried him beside her on the mountain under the shade of the tall pines, with a view of the valley spread below. The whole family gathered, 3 generations of Owens and Fosters, all of them alive because a mountain man had built a cradle early and fought like hell to keep his family together. The cabin remained the heart of the family compound, maintained and cherished by Gabriel and Amelia's descendants. The cradle stayed in its place of honor, still used for each new baby, still telling its story to anyone who would listen. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the pines and the fire crackled in the hearth, it was easy to believe that Gabriel and Amelia were still there, still watching over the family they had created, still choosing each other across the boundaries of life and death. Their love had started with a simple act of faith, a cradle built before it was needed, and it had grown into something that would last forever. A mountain man and his bride, building a life one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time, until they had created something beautiful and enduring and true. And somewhere beyond the veil, on that crossroads Amelia had described, they walked hand in hand into the light together, their story complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure in the hearts and lives of all who came after them. The cradle rocked on, generation after generation, a symbol of love and preparation, and the beautiful mystery of knowing when to build something before you even understand why it is needed. Gabriel had built it early. The baby had not been due for another month, but it had been ready and waiting anyway, just like the love that had carried them through every storm, just like the faith that had sustained them through every trial, just like the promise that had kept them together across the span of their lives and into eternity. It was a good cradle. It was the beginning of everything, and it would endure, just as their love endured, forever and always.